This is the second presentation on immunity. And of course, this lists our the two main functions: to destroy pathogens and foreign material, and here we will look particularly at preventing future cases of infectious disease. So we looked at innate immunity in our last presentation, that it treats every antigen the same. And doesn't remember ever coming upon that antigen before. It doesn't need to do that. But in adaptive immunity, this is very specific to the antigen that causes its process, shall we say. It may involve antibodies. There is memory, so it will remember this particular antigen, and it will keep a plan that it used to get rid of it. And that being said, it will become more efficient with each encounter. So the first time the cells have to make this plan and put it into action. But ensuing encounters, it's got the plan already, so it just has to put it in action. And the more it puts it in action, obviously the more practice it has, so it works better and faster. So in fighting off this foreign invader, this process, this immune process, it has two first steps. There are two types of adaptive immunity, but both have this first step. Macrophages and helper T cells, the CD4 Ts, are involved, although it can be done by both B and T cells. The antigen is engulfed by a macrophage, and in it doing so, obviously the cell has its own antigen, the macrophage, the cell, and then it takes the antigenic substances of whatever it engulfed and puts it on its membrane, and therefore it presents it to the helper T cells so that they begin action. And then we'll see there are two responses that can occur. So like I said, the macrophage has to engulf it. It has to have put what it engulfs antigens on its membrane along with its own. And the helper T then realizes that there's something can be done here. So we've got presentation and recognition as the first two steps. Then one of the processes that can occur is cell-mediated or cellular immunity. And this is most effective for intracellular pathogens, hence viruses, fungi, malignant cells, and foreign tissue grafts. The activated T cells then divide into memory T cells and cytotoxic T cells, which are the CD8 Ts. So the memory cells start the activation for future exposure. So like I said, they keep the plan. So there are some of these around that have this plan. And the cytotoxic Ts, on the other hand, chemically destroy the foreign antigen, and they produce cytokines, which also attract and activate macrophages. So here again, it keeps the process going. So in cell-mediated, like I said, this is basically the T cells that are involved here, having memory, and then which holds the plan, and how these cytotoxic Ts are formed so that they can act against this foreign antigen. The other choice after presentation and recognition could be antibody-mediated immunity or humoral immunity. So the T cells present this foreign material to the B cells, and then B cells divide into memory Bs, and their plasma cell is a type of B cell. So the memory Bs have the pattern, so they hold on to that plan that has been made, that have the plasma cells make antibodies against that antigen. And these antibodies are proteins, and they may be called immune globulins or gamma globulins. So an antigen and an antibody get hooked together. It forms a complex in opsonization or in complement fixation. So mostly what an antigen-antibody complex does is it labels this antigen for phagocytosis by macrophages or neutrophils. And obviously complement was that chemical that we talked about before. It can cause cell death. And here again, sometimes there is even partial fixation. So here again, that labeling to attract more macrophages. So the majority of what antibodies do are labeling to continue the immune processes until the body can get rid of this foreign antigen, a tumor cell or a germ. And this is happening all the time. Our body is constantly doing this, and we don't know what's going on. So it is amazing. We talk about antibody responses. The initial response, like I said, takes time for each step to be completed. So, it's got to the macrophage has to engulf it. It's got to bring it to the T cell. So presentation and recognition. And then it has the B cells, it activates B memories for that particular germ, and then the antibodies are made by the plasma cells. That takes a while. So if we get over an infection, this process has worked. But we will have signs and symptoms because it takes a while for it to get going, to get enough antibodies to get rid of the germs so that they are not causing their problems. But the second time around, when the body realizes, I've seen this before, it's go and finds that plan. So it doesn't take that time. The response is much quicker. And this is what we call that immunity. If we get a cold by a certain virus, a rhinovirus, we will get a cold by that one before. We won't get a cold caused by that virus again. There are many kinds of rhinoviruses, and they're always mutating to have other kinds, so there always are cold germs out there. But if you had a cold with one, you had signs and symptoms, runny nose, congestion, possibly, some cough, whatever. But when you get over it, your immune system, your immune response has taken care of that germ. And like I said, if it's involved adaptive immunity, which most often it does, cell-mediated or antibody-mediated, like I said, it's got that plan, so it can take over. So your body starts fighting it right away, and you don't get the illness caused by it. So antigens can connect to an antibody, and then another antibody can connect to that, and then the other side of the antibody can connect to another antigen. So we've got this all clumped up stuff called agglutination. Antibodies also attach to viruses. Then the virus can't enter another cell. So once it gets out there, that's what a virus wants to do, get in another cell to make more of itself. But if an antibody is attached to it, it cannot. And also, antibodies can change the shape of viral toxins. So even though the bacteria is making these toxins, it will change its effect so that they are not harmful. So there's lots of ways that antibody can react. Like I said, by agglutination, by labeling a virus so that cell won't let it in, or it's, like I said, will change the shape of toxins that are made by bacteria so that they are not harmful. And the initial response takes a longer time because it has to go through the entire process. But once those memory cells out there, the T's for the cell-mediated and the B's for the antibody-mediated, they're good to go. So we also use other terms for immunity. We talk about genetic immunity. That's the things we can't get sick or that germ won't grow in us. Like one of my plum trees got ruined by a plumpox virus. Didn't do anything to me, but it ruined the tree. So these are programmed in DNA, last for a lifetime, and it's this part that certain pathogens can only cause disease in certain species. Now we do see some germs that kind of mutate and can change species, but it's a hard and fast rule. Generally, this genetic DNA is programmed in the DNA. And then we also use the term acquired immunity. Those, the type of adaptive immunity that uses antibodies. And when we talked about acquired immunity, we can talk about passive, meaning that we are given antibodies. On the other hand, active, our body is being exposed to the antigen, and we'll go through all that process and have memory. So passive is temporary. When the antibodies are used up, they're done. But they are purposeful. We can get them from another source. The two naturally occurring ones are obviously the mother shares her antibodies. They get into the fetus's bloodstream by way of the placenta. And then, of course, if a mother nurses, the mother's milk has her antibodies, and she's giving those to the baby as long as that occurs. And then, of course, we've got artificial passive acquired immunity. Science has found that we can take antibodies from a person. At one time we actually gave those to other people. Now most often they're used as a pattern, although sometimes some are still used, and we can give those to someone else. So we call those an injection of gamma globulins. But here again, that can give a temporary immunity until those antibodies get used up. And often that is given as a preventive measure if someone has been exposed to a certain germ. On the other hand, active. Here again, its exact process depends on the foreign material, but the body has made the antibody. So the natural occurring situation is when we're exposed to a germ and we get the disease or we get the illness. And as I said, our immune system has taken care of it when we get over it, but it has that memory. My example is the rhinovirus, that we will no longer get a cold by that particular one. On the other hand, our artificial is science and medicine coming together, and the discovery and creation of vaccines. Here again, the vaccine just has the part of the antigen, or just has the antigenic part of the germ. It doesn't have the part that causes the problems. So we don't have what's going to make us sick, but we do have, our body recognizes the part that's going to cause adaptive immunity. And here again, we're going to have that memory. So our vaccine, which like I said is just the antigenic part, not the part of the germ that makes us sick, causes antibody production and memory cells. These vaccines, like I said, can be either dead, killed bacteria, attenuated, meaning they took out a part of them that makes one sick, or they can actually be a toxoid, which here again, that is that toxin that bacteria produce. But sometimes that can cause our body to create the antibodies. So your vaccines are very important. And here we can get a list at cdc.org under immunizations. You can see all the recommended ones. And each year these are reviewed, and recommendations are given when it's best to give these, so that here again we can get immunity as soon as we can. But we don't want to give it before the body is ready and able to make the antibodies and the memory cells for this. Just briefly, we'll discuss AIDS, because that is an illness of the immune system. It is caused by the virus, human immunovirus. And here again, we haven't found any cure for it. Prevention is the best bet, is avoiding the high-risk behaviors that might cause us to get this virus. We do have antivirals and that chemical interferon as medications that we could give to people. We call them cocktails because they're mixes of it. But they're medicines that certainly can kill this virus, but they also come with a lot of side effects too. So there really isn't any cure. And they are trying to get a vaccine. And that way, here again, we could get our bodies could recognize the antigenicity of it without it causing the problem. Because those CD4 helper cells that we saw way back, that is in the first two steps of adaptive immunity. Well, that's what it affects, and the body doesn't have functioning ones of those. And it's hard to find this vaccine because the virus itself keeps changing a little bit, so it's not always the same. Some other disorders of the immune system: severe combined immunodeficiency. The body doesn't have the proteins. It's not able to make them, so one doesn't have immune responses. And this is congenital. Obviously, it's there from birth. These are missing. Either something got confused in the DNA, and there are no directions for this. We talked about allergies before. When our body produces antibodies and an immune response with those substances like leukotrienes and histamine that make our eyes water and our nose run that we don't really need. And it was really not preventing anything harmful in our body. But here again, we said the signs and symptoms are due to the immune system's response to the inflammatory chemicals. Obviously, we can have localized, the cold. We can have the generalized if we get a cut or something that gets a little bit infected but stays there. And of course we talked about anaphylactic shock, which is life-threatening because the airways swell up and begin to close and the person can't breathe. And we know without oxygen that back to our energy production, can't do things, body cells can't do things, and they will die. And then we talked about autoimmune diseases. That's when the body starts producing antibodies that act up against its own cells. And some examples are rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and there should be a comma there, psoriasis. So aging in the immune system. Well, it shouldn't totally go away, but it's not as efficient and as effective over time. So older people are more susceptible to certain pathogens, like the flu, for example, influenza types A and B. It doesn't do as good a job against those, so that people get these. Their secondary infections become more prominent, and that's why a lot of older people get pneumonia, because the body's trying to fight something else off or deal with something else, and then this germ is around and it can cause problems. There are more flare-ups from hidden viruses like shingles. If you had chickenpox, you've got that virus and that hangs around in your body. But under some stressful situations, it may act up again and become, usually it just kind of lies there, a few of them, but it will grow and reproduce and get in cells, causing problems. And obviously it's an unattractive rash. It aggravates your nerves. There's a lot of pain. And then actually even sometimes once the virus has gone back to just a few parts and the redness goes away, post-traumatic nerve problems, there's continued pain. And of course, as we age, we see more autoimmune diseases, more rheumatoid arthritis, myasthenia gravis as examples. And of course, we'll see more cancer. Because here again, the immune system, if one of your cells goes awry, that it could be a malignant cell, it wants to settle in somewhere and tell its neighbors, be like me. But if the immune system can get it before it has the opportunity to do that, there is no cancer. But like I said, it's not as efficient. So obviously we have these carcinogens all around us, and there are more instances as one ages. So that finishes up the immune system.